Howdy, it's Jim Arado at the Lexington Cemetery here in Lexington, Kentucky. This is one of my favorite places to go and just drive around for the heck of it. This is a really historically significant cemetery, and I'll show you why in a little bit if you're not familiar with it. You know, especially if you're into history, Lincoln, Mary Todd Lincoln and Abraham Lincoln related, Civil War related. This cemetery is kind of a big deal. I believe it was the Civil War Monitor that said that they felt that this was the second most historic Civil War related cemetery in our nation after Hollywood in Virginia. And yeah, this is just an incredibly beautiful cemetery with a whole lot going on for it. And we just went through the gates, and I'm gonna leave this uncut until we get over to the Todd family plots. Of course, you've got a whole section here devoted to the Todd family, very significant to Lexington. They played a big part in the Civil War too, for the Confederacy. And many of them, actually a whole batch of them are buried here, and we'll see that here in just a moment. And in fact, really the only person missing from the little family plot up here would be Mary Todd Lincoln herself, who, as you know, is buried with her husband in Springfield, Illinois. But yeah, a lot of her people are buried just right up here. And, of course, here in Lexington, you can go see the Mary Todd Lincoln home, which is walking distance from Rupp Arena. It's not too far from where we're at right now, too. And just check this out. I'll let you look as we film. Yeah, and it is a rainy, dreary day when we visited. which is somewhat appropriate when you visit a cemetery. But you'll have to forgive me for the windshield wipers, and there will be raindrops on the windshield. Wanted to mention, one significant family member who's not over there. It's actually Benjamin Hardin Helm, who was Abraham Lincoln's brother-in-law. Helm was married to Emily Todd, the half-sister of Mary Todd Lincoln. He declined Abraham's offer to work with the Union, and he would end up dying at the Battle of Chickamauga. He was the commander of the Orphan Brigade, the very famous Orphan Brigade, and when he died, the White House, Mary Todd and Abraham went into a private mourning, and it was kind of a bit traumatic because Abraham thought highly of him. He is actually buried in Elizabethtown, and I've got another video up about him. But the whole Todd group was very much connected to the Confederacy, and certainly some of Mary Todd's contemporaries during her life felt that her sympathies leaned that way also. And as we're driving around, just a tiny bit about the Lexington Cemetery. As I've been doing quite a bit lately, I'm getting this from Wikipedia, who just has Wikipedia does a great job of kind of giving you the quick basic facts that you need up front, and I appreciate that. It mentions that the Lexington Cemetery is a private non-profit 170-acre cemetery. It's located at 833 West Main Street in Lexington. The cemetery was established in 1848 as a place of beauty and a public cemetery, in part to deal with the burials from the cholera epidemic in the area. It was designed by Charles S. Bell and John Lutz. It was originally 40 acres but was expanded to 170 acres, with more than 64,000 interments. Yeah, and it is a lovely place. Lots of, in fact, if you go to the Wikipedia entry on the Lexington Cemetery, it lists some of the notable people buried here by the letter. I mean, it's not 5 or 10 people. It gives, it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and there are a lot of significant people. A lot of people I'm not going to mention here just because I wanted to show you some of the ones I find the most interesting. And that's mostly Civil War related. I know my late neighbor Joe is actually buried here too. And of course we are going to go see here in just a second. We're going to drive by Jim Varney's final resting place. Jim Varney, very significant fellow to this area. Yeah, and Jim Varney, if you don't know, he was famous for being Ernest P. Worrell in some kind of regional, the national commercials, and then in the movies, the Ernest movies that were big in the mostly early 90s. And here's his final resting place. He started his career, a lot of people know this in the area, at the Pioneer Playhouse in Danville. He did some theater there, along with a few other notables, including John Travolta, just for what that's worth. But I do remember reading, and people have left coins, and there's even a DVD there. There's some guitar picks. Obviously, a lot of love for Jim Varney. And yeah, I was going to say, I remember reading in one of the Pioneer Playhouse books from the family that runs the Pioneer Playhouse. I believe the main fella there who used to run the place before his kids took over. I remember reading him saying something about Jim Varney being a great Shakespearean actor. The man was a brilliant actor. And, he's remembered for Ernest P. Worrell and for cartoon voices and, Slinky the dog and that kind of thing. Anyway, but he made people smile, and he had some great characters. And it's wonderful that he's still in Lexington, here at the cemetery. Here within the Lexington Cemetery is the Lexington National Cemetery, which is a United States national cemetery administered by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs. It encompasses less than 4,050 square meters, 1 acre, and as of 2014 had approximately 1,700 internments. It is closed to new internments. And the Lexington National Cemetery was originally a military section of the Lexington Cemetery, which was first used for American Civil War casualties in 1861. After the war, several makeshift battlefield cemeteries had their remains moved to Lexington. In 1863, the lot was officially designated a national cemetery, and in 1867, an additional 1,500 square meters were purchased by the federal government to increase the lot to its current size. So anyway, yeah, there's a couple of markers there about it, and it's just laid out really nicely there. I think it's just it just looks nice and peaceful, and it looks very military. There is a poem up, and then there's also the Gettysburg Address right there. A nice, appropriate additional Lincoln connection. And we are heading towards the Henry Clay Monument. And Henry Clay, of course, is very well known in Lexington. He is probably the most famous also-ran presidential candidate ever. He ran several times. He, of course, never won. He had relationships. He was close to both Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd, and there's volumes that have been written about him. Look him up if you'd like, but he's he is all over the place, and his monument, as we'll see, is about one of the most, well, it's huge, and I'm just walking up to it. It's big, it's beautiful. You can see it. It would be just about impossible to miss it if you came to the Lexington Cemetery just to see the Henry Clay one. You couldn't miss it. Just drive around, look up, you're gonna find it. And of course, other members of his family are nearby, and several markers. And while we're here, I'll go ahead and read this to you. Henry Clay, born in Virginia in 1777, came to Lexington at the age of 20 and quickly established a successful law practice. In 1799, he married Lucretia Hart, daughter of one of the city's most prominent families. He served 6 years in the Kentucky House of Representatives, part of that time as Speaker, and filled 2 unexpired terms in the United States Senate before being elected to the U.S. House in 1811. There he was Speaker until 1814, and again from 1815 to 1820, and 1823 to 1825. In 1814 he was one of the country's ministers to Ghent, where the treaty with Great Britain was written, ending the War of 1812. From 1825 to 1829 he was Secretary of State under President John Quincy Adams, and from 1831 to 1842 and 1849 to 1852 was a U.S. Senator. Throughout his long career, Clay was famed as one of America's greatest statesmen and orators, and was a candidate for President of the United States in 1824, 1832, and again in 1844. After his death in Washington in 1852, his remains were brought to Lexington for burial, as he had instructed. The Clay Monument Association financed and erected this memorial, which was completed in 1861, and which contains the sarcophagi of Henry Clay and Mrs. Clay, who died in 1864. In July 1976, the weather-worn monument, restored by state and local governments, was rededicated and enrolled on the National Register of Historic Places. So yeah, that's where Henry Clay is at, and it is definitely something to see, as you can tell there. Yeah, and we're about to start walking away from the clay monument. Or no, actually, I guess we're driving away. And we're about to visit the final resting site of John C. Breckenridge. And there is also a famous statue there at that plot too, but I wanted to just go ahead and mention a little bit about him. Possibly one of the all-time most controversial figures in American politics. Just going from Wikipedia, John Cabell Breckenridge was an American lawyer, politician, and soldier. He represented Kentucky in both houses of Congress and became the 14th and youngest ever Vice President of the United States, serving from 1857 to 1861. He was a member of the Democratic Party and served the U.S. Senate during the outbreak of the Civil War, but was expelled after joining the Confederate Army. He was appointed Confederate Secretary of War in 1865. And yeah, it talks a little bit. He was, born in Kentucky of a Democratic, of a prominent family. Goes into his, his whole political career. Gets into the Civil War and all that. And he was nominated for vice president in 1856 to balance a ticket headed by James Buchanan. And then he became president or vice president of the United States and was just a heartbeat away from being president of the United States, which is just interesting when you think about everything. Yeah, and there's no way to get into everything everything involved with John Breckenridge within a couple of minutes, but yeah, he obviously sided with the Confederacy after being vice president, and that was kind of a big deal. In February 1865, Confederate President Jefferson Davis appointed him Secretary of War. Concluding that the war was hopeless, he urged Davis to arrange a national surrender. After the fall of Richmond, Breckenridge ensured the preservation of Confederate records. He then escaped the country and lived abroad for more than 3 years. When President Andrew Johnson extended amnesty to all former Confederates in 1868, Breckenridge returned to Kentucky, but resisted all encouragement to resume his political career. War injuries sapped his health, and he died in 1875. He is regarded as an effective military commander. Though well-liked in Kentucky, he was reviled by many in the North as a traitor. So, yeah, that tells you a little bit about Breckenridge. Also, his and John Hunt Morgan's statues that we've seen and will see, the Morgan one here shortly, have been replaced from prominent spots in downtown Lexington to here at their the cemetery areas. And we're now at John Hunt Morgan's area where he and his family are buried. Lots of Morgans here, lots of prominent Morgans in Lexington. John Hunt Morgan is another very controversial figure in the Civil War, known for his famous raids. And again, volumes have been written about those. I've actually been to the site where he was captured and killed towards the end of the Civil War in Greenville, Tennessee, which is a nice little town with a lot of history relating to the previously mentioned Andrew Johnson, President number 17, and John Hunt Morgan. And so, yeah, there's you can see Morgan and some siblings' burial sites. And right here is the resting place of Basil Duke, who was John Hunt Morgan's brother-in-law and his basically second in command. Also preserved a whole lot of information about the Confederacy and the Civil War after the war. Very significant in his own right when it comes to the Civil War especially. Well, I wanted to mention too, also here in Lexington, is the Hunt Morgan House. So, if you're interested in the Civil War, you can come down and see the Hunt Morgan House, where John Hunt Morgan spent some time along with his family. And you can also visit the Mary Todd Lincoln House, along with this cemetery. And there's the Henry Clay Estate, Ashland, which is another big deal for this area. I wanted to mention those places. Couple of other notes, just for what it's worth. There are a couple of brothers. I've looked for their. Oh, and here's the John Hunt Morgan statue that was recently moved to the cemetery. It is a very, very attractive statue. And we're also going to be seeing the Confederate Soldier Monument in Lexington, which is on the National Register of Historic Places, put there in 1997. And it's close to the monument is the Ladies Confederate Memorial, also part of the Civil War Monuments of Kentucky MPS. 4 residents of Lexington with means funded the construction of the monuments, buying a statue built in Carrara, Italy, from a catalog, and in 1893 was erected by the Muldoon Monument Company. The names of 160 veterans of the Confederate Army are inscribed on the monolith. So yeah, just thought I would mention that too. But there are a couple of brothers that both died fighting for opposite sides during the Civil War. At the Battle of Perryville, the Hamilton brothers. I've never been able to find their monuments. If you know where those are, let me know. I know they're here somewhere, and I'm sure I've walked right past them. But that's something that kind of haunts me. Anyway, yeah. So I we're about to ride out of the cemetery. I'll let you look at a few. I love the little dancing girl there. Some great stones here and there to check out. I just wanted to mention a couple quick books real quick before we get out of here. Perryville Under Fire by Stuart Sanders mentions one of the most significant Civil War battles in Kentucky, and it's not that far from here either. You could check that out. It's not in Lexington. It's a little bit of a drive. Maybe a little over an hour down the road. And also a guy named Garrett Moffett wrote a book called Haunted Springfield, Illinois. And Garrett does a ghost walk and does some historic tours in Springfield. And he has some wonderful theories about Mary Todd, who a lot has been talked about as far as her mental health goes. And Garrett, very sympathetically, has a very well thought out theory about her health. Probably untreated diabetes and things like that kind of affected the way she acted and lived her life. Not to mention, her assassinated husband, several children who had died, and that whole Civil War thing. But I just wanted to mention those 2 books real quick. But yeah, check out the Lexington Cemetery. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me as we looked at some of the monuments in the Lexington Cemetery.